Just bear with me.
It's been a minute to take my sheet off that. So. Can people hear me okay?
Yes.
No problem. Okay, we're live.
Lovely.
Right, up and
Thank
running.
you. Good morning and welcome to the HR subcommittee. I trust that people have had their agendas and papers for the meeting. So can I just ask, do we have apologies for absence?
I haven't had any apologies, Chair, and we seem to all be here.
Lovely, and it's a lovely sunny morning as well. I hope where people are, certainly where I am. Do we have any declarations of interest? Assuming not. In which case, can we just agree our minutes for the last time this committee met, which was actually a year ago, last January. So unless people have got any alterations or can even remember that meeting, can we just approve them as an accurate record, please? I'll just ask you to show your hands. Thank you. In which case, we can start on what are the interesting items of the agenda. So we're just going to take a HR update. And I think, Craig, are you going to take that for us?
I'm going to be part of it, but Tracy's going to be taking us through this as the Area Manager for People and Organisational Development, Chair. Can I just sort of say, you just prompted me there about it's a year since members have been able to have a committee, and it's good to see we can get back to scrutiny in these very difficult times. If I could sort of take the floor and just sort of thank all the staff in the service for getting us to this point and the hard work that goes into the reports, and we're carrying on to do some normal business even though we're dealing with COVID. and no members from your authorities will know all about that, but I just feel it's incumbent for the purpose of this just sort of pass my thanks on to all the staff for getting us to this point. Thanks, Chair. Okay, so human resources update. This is a regular report that gets brought, just give you a snapshot of how we're doing around the organisation, things like establishment and absence. So if I could, Tracy, are you okay to walk us through the report, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we'll be starting with a review of absence, and what we've done within the report is to bring together quarters 1 and 2, bearing in mind that we obviously haven't had the opportunity to meet since January. So these take us from April to the end of September, so quarters 1 and 2. I think what you'll see from the narrative and from the table is that there's been a significant decrease in absence between April and the end of September compared to previous periods. And bearing in mind, this is taken into account COVID-related absence where people have either had to self-isolate because they have symptoms themselves or where they've tested positive. So that, you know, we're covering that sort of period. We are beginning to see a bit of a small increase by the end of quarter 2, and the graph in Appendix A really sets this out so that members can see, you know, how significant that reduction has been during the period. I mean, this may be partly accounted for by the periods of self-isolation and lockdown, because obviously there has been less social contacts, there's been less contacts in the workplace, and obviously massively improved hygiene in terms of sort of people ensuring, you know, that they're keeping their distance, they're washing their hands, all those sorts of things I think will have helped with this because of the link to perhaps less transmission of normal viruses and the normal things that people come down with at work and while they're sort of in contact socially. So that may account for some of this. Obviously there are support staff, quite a lot of our support staff are also working from home during this period. But I'd also like to think that this is down to the support that we provided as well through our occupational health teams and HR teams and managers to support people through this period, and also obviously to provide health and wellbeing advice and support to people who are poorly and people coming back into the workplace as well. So I'd like to think that you know, a lot of this has led to this reduction that we've seen in the first 6 months of the year. Recently, for instance, we've commissioned a series of online workshops about understanding mental ill health. whether that's in yourself or seeing it in others, which has been called Talk, Listen, Learn. And they're hour-long sort of webinars that any of our employees can choose to tune into during working time. And we've also supplemented this by a workshop for managers on how they can identify and deal appropriately with signs of mental ill health. So we haven't stopped doing this sort of work and providing this sort of support over the last 6 months. Another fact to note from the report 2.4 is that just over 50% of sickness absence is due to long-term medical conditions. So they are conditions that are GP certified, and that mean that people are off work for over 28 days. So, you know, quite significant health conditions that people are dealing with. I think what we will start to see, just to put a flag up there, is we will start to see, because of seasonal factors, some increases in absence, and that's to be expected, and that's sort of what we are starting to see over the winter months, which we always do. But I think the expectation is that the figures for this year will be significantly lower than we have had in previous years, which is obviously a good message to relay. Under 2.7, we look at our position against national trends within the sector, because there is a national absence survey that's coordinated every quarter, and which we contribute to. And looking at sort of the national outcomes, we do seem to be within the better performing services and are below the national sickness average across all of our work groups. So, you know, I suppose the report that I'm making as regards to absence is that we've seen significant reductions. We're glad to see those reductions, obviously, and that we will continue to support our staff through COVID and through whatever, you know, other medical issues that they're having to deal with. So I don't know if there's any questions on absence before I move to some of the other metrics.
Thank you, Tracy. That's really a comprehensive walkthrough. Can I just ask you very quickly, when someone has tested positive for COVID, are you recording that in terms of sickness absence?
Yes, we do. We record all. We're required to report nationally to the Home Office on COVID. So we record whether people have tested positive, if they're self-isolating due to symptoms, whether they're self-isolating due to somebody in their household, perhaps being poorly or having been tracked and traced. So any of those reasons, we have about 6 different reasons that people might be absent through COVID, and we record all of those and we report those weekly through the Home Office.
And despite that, there's been a downward trend in sickness absence.
Yes, as I say, we would only record COVID absence as sickness if somebody's positive, so they're poorly themselves, or if they're self-isolating because they have symptoms.
Okay. I think Javaid would like to come in with a question to you. I hate to say this, Javaid, but you're still on mute.
That's how people prefer me, actually, but anyway. Sorry, yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, I mean, I really welcome the report. I mean, I think where we were last year, I did raise some questions and sort of asked some questions about levels of absence and what we're doing to address those issues. So it's really welcome news that we're seeing an improvement in the figures, and especially in light of the fact that we've had a difficult sort of 9 months in terms of COVID and pressures on the service as a whole and on individuals and families. And that can't, you know, go unnoticed really, because the impact on individuals are in society and communities. And don't forget, our staff are part of community as well. And for them to be turning up to work and doing a diligent job and an excellent job in these circumstances is to be welcomed. And I think I would just ask if it's possible for us as an organisation to communicate that to our staff, whether it's through a newsletter or through the publications that you normally do. I'm not saying individual letters, but I think certainly we should acknowledge that our absence levels are going down, and we want to actually acknowledge that and actually thank our staff for working so hard in the difficult circumstances and then still coming to work. and I think it needs to be there needs to be a real positive slant on that and acknowledgement that our stuff. And I think it's just sometimes seeing that in black and white will actually sort of motivate people really. And I think we're quick to get onto people's back and be a little bit sort of questioning and investigatory about why absence is happening and why and this and that. But equally, when there's a good news story, I think we need to promote that and acknowledge it. So I think we should do that. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
So obviously, I think all members in this meeting would agree with what Javaid has just said. Craig, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, just to respond really to Councillor Khalil's comments there. Really welcome that, Councillor. It's nice that councillors are paying that kind of attention to. I mean, sickness absence has been a bit weird, I guess, really. I mean, some people who may have been booked sick previously short term may not be booking sick anymore because they've got the ability to work from home. So we'll need to get to understand it later. So they may have not took Friday morning off because they can work from home in the dressing gown, as a, as a silly analogy. COVID as well, I think we're around about 6.5% total absence at the moment. So that's just under 50 people roughly. And only about half of that is through COVID. So about 3%, around there we're fluctuating, I think is the right numbers. So, we're doing quite well on the COVID front. It clearly gets worse as the bigger peaks have hit us, as it has nationally. But we'll hopefully get some analysis about what we actually saw over time, really. And also around the communication of the good news story. We try and take every opportunity. The Chief does a staff briefing live by Zoom or Skype, whichever media we use, to the workforce, and we do some recording. So hopefully we are communicating, and through heads of departments as well, that we're doing a good job, and we'll certainly be passing that on. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Tracy, do you want to take us through the rest of the report then?
Yes, we'll do. So just to highlight some of the key points from the rest of the report, really. Under 2.11, we just take an overview of processes we might be going through up between April and December. I think I would draw attention to the redundancy, which is about halfway down that list, just to say this was redundancy related to the restructure of the equipment section, which was reported through the authority. So that just gives some context to that. And just to flag up, we do, at the moment, we are in the proprietary stage of preparing for an employment tribunal case, which is due to be heard later in the year. And that this is linked, obviously I can't disclose any details at this stage, but it's linked to a constructive dismissal claim. So just provide some information around that. Moving on to the establishment then, from 2.12, you can see from whole time there, we are, or at the end of December, we were currently 3 under the establishment for operational firefighters. We've just completed a whole time recruitment campaign, which is resulting in 28 offers of employment. We will be bringing in the first new course of apprentice firefighters in April, and then a second course will start in September, so that you can see we're under establishment at the moment. We have planned for that. We have worked even through COVID, and it's been very challenging to do the whole time recruitment through COVID, because a lot of it has had to be, as you can imagine, done online. And we've managed to do some positive action work within that as well. So really proud of the team that have managed to achieve that. So although we are reporting an under establishment at the moment, that's obviously in hand, and we will see us moving to full establishment come April. In terms of on-call, we've managed to complete 2 campaigns during the course of the year. So there was a course in August, which saw 9 new on-call staff going through training. And there's a new training course just started last week in January with another 11 trainees. So 20 new trainees in total brought in during the course of the year. And we've just launched our next advertising campaign for the next course. So again, even with COVID and all of the things going on, we have managed to continue the recruitment process and to work with people to bring them into our on-call teams. So again, many thanks to those people who've been involved with that. In terms of support staff, you'll note that there have been a number of new starters in the period. Most of those have been to fixed term contract positions to support specific projects. And a lot of those have been funded by the transformational budget that the authority put into place in February. So we have been maintaining progress against that. So still managing to recruit people into the positions to take forward work that we continue to do and to prioritise. So that's just to explain that number at the end, which says plus 17. So some of those will be to establish posts because people have left, or we've had new posts that we've created, but a lot of those will be fixed term appointments. So I suppose, you know, taking from that, you'll see there's been no real slowdown in recruitment despite the pandemic. And again, just to reiterate the hard work of the HR team and other teams and managers in making all of that happen.
That's fine. Thank you, Tracy, for a comprehensive update. Do members have any questions to Tracy on the rest of the report? John.
Thank you, Chair. Just congratulate the team on their work. It's all very positive, and the constant reference to constant training, I find a big plus, which I totally have always championed. And it's a good report. It's nice to see we get more and more people in all the time. We know we've got 40 leave, 50 starters. So it's a plus, and I repeat, constant reference to constant training has to be a big plus. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Craig, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I suppose I don't want to take any shine off what Tracy's done, because it has been a monumental year, and people have, and she's absolutely right, the fact we've carried on doing things. I just want to draw members' attention to the table in 2.12, and particularly around the on-call figure. You'll notice there on the right-hand side that we're saying minus 61. And I suppose that's just to reiterate the ongoing challenge the Fire and Rescue Service has, not just Nottinghamshire, the service has in terms of recruitment and retention of our on-call staff. And bearing in mind that that is more than half of our appliances that are crewed by on-call staff. So that is obviously a clear issue for us. So there are a lot of things that we are doing, just to give you some reassurance around. We are looking at sustainability of on-call through different contractual arrangements. That can be problematic in so much that there are national terms and conditions, and that might be things like local agreements, which will take a lot of work to do. But we're working with the representative bodies and the workforce generally to try and see how we can do that. And the other thing I would sort of say is that it is a somewhat of a concern to us around the middle section of on-call, where it talks about dual contract. And members are probably aware that's where they have got a whole-time job with us as a firefighter, and also a firefighter on the on-call. Now, clearly that's an issue for us in so much that where one firefighter is sick, we lose them from 2 posts. So it affects our resilience slightly. So we are looking at that. And that particularly focuses around supervisory managers. So the number of supervisory managers that are actually on call and dual contract. So we don't want to be complacent and give members some reassurance that where you do see a lowering of numbers there, we're working our best, but it is a national challenge. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Craig. Can I move us on to the Equality of Monitoring report, which is item 5. Craig, are you going to take this alongside Matt, or are you going to introduce it? Craig, you're still on mute.
Sorry, Chair, I have this perennial problem with I think my keyboard, but modern world problems, as everybody is finding. Yeah, this one's going to be Matt taking us through it as he normally does. And obviously, members as a part of the Strategic Inclusion Board will know Matt, and Matt's been working really hard over the last year with some quite good stuff. So, if I could, Chair, pass you straight to Matt.
Thank you.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Matt. Good to see you.
Can you hear me okay? So yeah, good morning. Just wanted to take you through this regular report that we bring to HR committee, providing you with an overview of the numbers within the workforce, broken down by protected characteristic. You can obviously see the table on the first page of the report, which provides you with an ongoing kind of benchmark between previous years and shows you the progress that's been made since 2018. And you can see there's been a steady increase over that period around Black and Asian minority ethnic positions, posts, and also female firefighters as well. We've had an increase in the number of female firefighters coming into the organisation over that period, which is good. In terms of the last 12 months, the figures haven't increased greatly. Generally, things have remained the same. I suppose the caveat that I'd say with that is that we've had a whole-time recruitment process this year. Well, I say this year in 2020, which we managed to do during the summer, which started. I think it was August that we actually kicked off recruitment, but we started positive action earlier than that, and we went through a successful whole-time process during that period. So we will have a new group of whole-time firefighters coming into the organisation during 2021, which is really good to see. The other thing that I'd like to draw to your attention is the appointment of a community engagement manager post, which will be particularly in support of some of the work that's outlined within this report. We've spoken within Strategic Inclusion Board and the HR Committee about the role of HR and service delivery functions in engaging with BAME communities, and that we know that we need to do more. This post, as Tracy said, has come out of the transformation efficiency funding, and is an 18-month post. Mohammed Yassin was successful and started a couple of weeks ago, and has hit the ground running, I think it's fair to say. His role will be around positive action and employer of choice work, but also around scrutiny by BAME communities, but also ensuring that we are consulting more readily and more regularly on policy and development of functions within the service. There's a service delivery element to that role as well. So we don't want this to be just about employment, because we know that we want to be ensuring that actually we are talking to people about the services that we deliver, as well as the employment opportunities that we can offer as well, because we see that the two go hand in hand. So that's a real plus, and so we've been welcoming Yassin to the organisation over the last week or so. I suppose moving down the report, I'd also like to draw your attention to the work of the organisation in promoting disability and declaration of disability in the service. Declaration rates remain relatively level, I'd say, but our work, as Tracy mentioned, the training that we're providing to staff, I was on it yesterday, really good training for managers and for non-managers around mental health, but also some developments around disability and making sure that our staff and our managers understand reasonable adjustments and supporting disabled staff in the service, whether they choose to declare it or not. We want to make sure that we're providing reasonable adjustments, and we work hard to do that. In terms of LGBTQ+ issues and sexual orientation, 2.18, again, you'll see the figures are relatively level, and they generally remain quite level. We're undertaking development with staff to try and improve awareness and understanding. On the 1st of February, we'll be running a webinar on trans inclusion to try and improve awareness of trans issues in the workplace. And also, I mean, it's worth saying that the the figures from the whole time recruitment process demonstrate that we've got 18% of our intake for 2021 of whole time firefighters will be LGB. So I think that's a really, really positive and
definitely
the best results that we've had in terms of LGB applicants. Really, really positive. In terms of religion and belief, we spoke last year about faith training, and some of that was put on hold by COVID and lockdown. We did manage to run a pilot course for staff, which was delivered by the St Philip's Centre. We've also got an e-learning package which we're going to be completing this year and rolling out to staff this year. And we're also looking at developing some podcasts as well, some faith podcasts, which are going to be delivered by our staff for our staff. So that's something that I want us to get moving before the end of March. So those are kind of some of the main issues that I wanted to mention. I suppose I should mention some of the work that's come out of Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd. A BAME forum was pulled together by Sonny Roberts and Jazz Hayer, and out of that has been developed a BAME action plan. One of the things that we wanted to do was try and increase representative panels for interviews, which we put some real effort into for the whole time recruitment process, and we're going to be trying to expand that further into other roles, into Green Book support staff roles during 2021 as well. We also have an applicant audit which we're going to be bringing to this committee, the next committee, for the previous year, for 2020, so that we can go through some of the decisions that have been made in terms of on-call support and support staff positions, and make sure that those are being made in the correct way. There's nothing to suggest at the moment that anything is being, any decisions are being made in the wrong way, but we've committed to the HR committee that we would do that, and we are going to be doing that. We do have some results that we want to present to you. And I think that's probably it. I suppose the other thing that I'd mention is that we've also managed to keep our Actor Shop training online. So the equality, diversity and inclusion training that Councillor Kudus, I think you've attended, and some of the members of the panel may have attended as well. We've now managed to put that onto Zoom, albeit obviously in a different way, but we've managed to maintain momentum of training for staff in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion issues. So yeah, really, really pleased with the progress that we've made on the EDI agenda this year. And so yeah, I'll hand it back to you, Tracy or Craig or Shagufta, if you've got any questions.
I'm happy to take any questions from any members before I launch into my questions. Sinead.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you, Tracy. Yeah, it's actually quite welcome that you've actually appointed somebody to do a specific piece of work on positive action. And it's something that I remember I mentioned at the last meeting, that if we really wanted to address and redress the balance in terms of representation, then we really need to do something more and perhaps work within the legal parameters of positive action specifically, but also in a wider sense of actually promoting the organisation and getting out there and connecting with communities as a whole. And so I welcome that. And I also welcome the fact that it's the person who is Mohammed Yassin. I know Yassin from a different life, living and growing up in Nottingham and working in Nottingham for the last 30 odd years. And all I would say is that I think that's a very good appointment as well. I'm sure he'll be good at the job. I know he's passionate about these things, and he's quite tenacious and committed sort of individual. So I think that'll be a good addition to the workforce, really. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask Matt, is his role going to just be about community engagement, or will he be working with BAME staff within the organisation? In terms of, we know that we have BAME staff, but in terms of progression, BAME staff are not as visible on the progression ladder. Is that something that his role is going to look at, or is he just about community engagement?
No, I think we want to ensure that positive action is not just an external thing, that it's an internal thing as well. And we do and we have been doing positive action aimed at BAME staff and women and other people from underrepresented groups over the last few years. Obviously, we're part of the Future Leaders programme, which is the multi-agency positive action leadership programme within the city. And yeah, we'll continue to do that work, and yes, it will be part of Yazine's role to help us to promote that internally. Excellent,
because I think there is, I have a concern that we're a bit stuck with that, and we're not quite sure how to support staff like, is it Jazz?
Yeah.
Who've just reached a certain level but don't seem to be. Craig, did you want to come in and
I'm sure Tracy
clarify?
I think we need to look at this like the kind of, I hate the cliche saying that the bigger picture thing, Councillor, is that there's the external engagement with communities, and Matt referenced the fact that Mohammed can't do this job in isolation. We need him to work with our prevention, protection and response staff, so the front-facing side of the organisation, to make sure we engage communities and the services we deliver. And it's also got to be the first contact that our crews have, where they recognise that somebody might like a career in the fire service. So they've got to engage at a different level, not just respond to the incident of need. They've got to engage with the individual and the person. So say, well, have you ever thought about a career in the fire service at that level? We've also then got to think about the recruitment numbers, and will the positive action turn into applications? And Matt's absolutely right. We often look at positive action about, let's make sure we get a balance in the whole time recruitment course, as opposed to positive action within. And we have got somebody, somebody who's been working with Matt around positive action following the HMI. Unfortunately, they're going away to do some volunteer work. Well, I say volunteer, we're seconding them over to do COVID as part of the multi-agency response to vaccination and testing. So we are trying to get information across to managers so that we actually use managers more who think about talent spotting and positive action around underrepresented employee groups. So there's a kind of multifaceted approach to this that I feel is coming together with a little bit more synergy at the moment. And what I'm hoping with Mohammed coming in is his experience, knowledge and understanding will give people tools and knowledge about how they can then go and do it. So I'm hoping he's going to be a big addition to us, but hopefully then spread out into the other managers. And what we hope to see, because of course we're limited on people coming in the organisation, so we have to try and progress people who are already here and think actually progression and promotion is something for them. BAME employees and female operational staff, if I was being very specific, don't necessarily see progression in fire service as a choice for them, or something maybe that they feel is further away than some other employee groups. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or queries from members? Matt, can I ask you a little bit more about the faith pilot that you did with the St. Philip Centre? Is that something that's going to really work? Are you optimistic about rolling it out?
Yeah, so we ran the pilot with a group of staff. I think there were about 8 or 10 people on that Zoom training session. We'd got a couple of tweaks to make. I personally wasn't involved because I was on leave that day, but Tom Briggs ran it for us, and liaised with the St Philip's Centre, and yeah, I'm quite happy that I think we're gonna be able to do a few more sessions on that and start to develop something really good. I don't think that it's not, you know, going to be the panacea for us for faith training, because I would like us to bring back something which is more about engagement. We used to do a lot more kind of visits to places of worship, which due to resource considerations and issues, we stopped doing. And actually it'd be really nice if we actually were able to bring some of that back. And I've already spoken to Yazine about doing some of that. So, and he was very keen. So yeah, it'd be lovely if we could have a bit more of a blended approach to faith training.
And I think that's something certainly that I would support, because, you know, it has a really powerful impact if people can, you know, step into a place that's different to their normal, and it really builds empathy and understanding. So I'd certainly support that.
Yeah. Around
the BAME group and the conversations that happened post the BLM stuff in the summer, is that group continuing to meet then with the action plan? Has that been established? Does it have terms of reference? Is it an ongoing conversation?
Yes, it is. Craig, I don't know if you might want to pick that up, as you've been pulling that group together.
Yes, he has.
Yes, Chair. No, those meetings are programmed in. I think they're roughly about every 2 months. It's still fairly informal, which feels like that. The feedback I'm getting from people is that they like it as a discussion forum, with the BAME action plan being more integrated into the kind of the more EDI things. I think that is something that, you know, it's going to take time, I think, about people taking part in it and the value for the individuals. But in terms of the discussion and its visibility, it's definitely still there, Chair. Yes, and I'm hoping. I've actually got a call with Mohammed Yassine today, actually, as a bit of an introductory call, and he's already sent me some information around the forum and engagement already. So I'm hoping he's going to be able to help me make sure we make best of that forum. But in short, lots of ways to just say, yes, it's still there, Chair.
Excellent. That's really good to hear, and a really good, you know, positive outcome. So, and again, I think as a committee, we would support that. So if people don't have any other comments, can I move us on to the next update, which is the apprenticeship update? I think we're back to you, Craig, for that.
Yes, it was going to be with Tracy as well, but no, that's fine. I think Tracy's dropped out. Okay, Chair. So members will clearly know about apprenticeship, and there was government targets and public sector targets for the use of apprenticeships. And as a public body, we are levied that pays into a national levy for apprenticeship scheme, and we can then draw back down on that levy. The financial implications of the report will show members that I think it's about 120,000 that we are levied annually, and we drew down about £75,000 from that levy. And again, section 2.7 gives members examples of the kind of apprentices that we do have. And we've just actually had through the last whole time recruitment course, they've just gone through their final endpoint assessment as part of the whole time apprenticeship. And glad to say they've all passed, and you know, some with, you know, incredibly high scores, distinctions, but they've all done incredibly well. So we're really happy that they've come through the apprenticeship scheme. One of the downsides from the operational workforce, of course, we've got, as I said to members earlier, so many of our staff are on call. There is the ability to do on call as an apprenticeship, but it is so problematic in terms of the time that you need to commit to an apprenticeship. And then you're clear, if I'm an on-call firefighter, I've got other jobs to do as well. So this is only part of my life. So at the moment, we're not choosing to do apprenticeships through on-call. And we just don't think we're in a position to do that at the moment, but that is something we are definitely having a look at as things progress. So generally speaking, we are making use of the apprenticeship. It is something that we do, and certainly heads of department when they're looking to recruit, we do ask them to consider around apprenticeships. And the value of that, of course, is that if we are able to offer them posts at the end, we're able to see somebody retain a lot of knowledge, what they have about us. So they don't just come in and do an apprenticeship with us and then disappear with some skills and work somewhere else. We are able to retain some of those skills within the organisation. So that's a bit of a flavour, Chair, about the apprenticeship. There's a bit of recognition here. It took a Herculean effort for something that sort of takes money away from the authority and gets 2/3 of it back. A lot of effort has had to go into, and of course we are subject to things like Ofsted, running apprenticeships and things. We are subject to Ofsted inspections, and I believe we should have a report coming soon when Ofsted visits us, a little bit like HMI. So Ofsted, we should get a report, and the intention is, Chair, that we will bring that Ofsted report back to HR committee to give members some overview and scrutiny about how we are doing against the apprenticeships. If there's any questions, Chair, really.
I don't have any questions. I don't know if other members have any questions or comments. In which case, can we note the report and take the next report that's on our agenda, which is the I always get stuck with this, HMI update. I think we're back to you, Craig, for this.
Yes, we are, Chair. I used to try and say all HMI CFRS, Chair, but I just go say HMI now. It's just so much easier. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, members will know that we had a crikey, whenever it was 2019, the HMI inspection. Fire services have not been inspected in this way for at least a decade, from the disestablishment of the HMI previously when fire services were subject to it. We obviously, what came out of that was our areas for improvement. The service is regarded as requires improvement across all three strands, so effective, efficient and people. And we got 25 headline areas for improvement. It was agreed by the wider fire authority that the committees would have oversight of the individual as they relate to people. So of course HR committee members get the ones that were more around the people strand of the HMI inspection. I guess this report really is probably, I'd like to actually pitch it as it's a good news story. We are actually delivering the final 2 areas for improvement for recommendation for closure that will be reported to HR committee. Really pleased about that, because there's, as I say, we've had a year of that time since the inspection during COVID, and we've worked really hard to make sure that the authority has got the scrutiny oversight that we've made the improvements that were asked of us. That said, we can't be complacent, and I think the previous reports show you the improvements in areas we are still trying to make, whether it be about representation in the workforce, positive action, or whether it be about training and competency of the workforce. So the overall report, Chair, is for areas for improvement 20 and 25. To recommend them for closure. Just a little bit wider on that as well around HMI. We had HMI saw fit to do a thematic inspection for COVID. We had that inspection at the back end of last year where it was done predominantly virtually. So we had an inspection about our response to COVID. And today the letter is being published and the report is being published into how we performed, or how we have performed to date through the COVID pandemic. And really pleasing to say we've come out with a really, really good positive response from HMI about how they feel that we have done as an organisation through COVID. And what I think that shows is we've obviously learnt about how to respond and process HMI inspections. So, you know, yeah. I'm not saying play the game, but if members understand what I mean, is that we've got our heads around as an organisation about, you know, responding to HMI. And I think that's helped us a little bit about how we approach them and the relationship we have with HMI. It's absolutely shown the workforce how they have responded really across the board, whether it be frontline firefighters, you know, or people in more support roles. We've got people in support roles who are out doing volunteer work alongside firefighters. So it's definitely a service effort. And it also underlines the local arrangements we've got, because there's lots of tensions nationally about fire service involvement in some of this work. And I have to pay some sort of courtesy and respect really to the local working relationships and industrial relations that remain positive under very challenging times. And I'm sure they're going to continue to be challenging. So HMI have published a letter around COVID. Members will be able to, I think we are sending that directly to members, I think, now that it's been agreed, so that you can actually see that as well. And it just reflects really, I think, the direction of travel the service is in. The next HMI, we're unsure really. We were scheduled for the back end of this year really, or beginning of 2022 for our second full HMI inspection. They are going to run some virtual inspections at the moment and then see how they go. And that may affect when we get inspected. We have asked them to be mindful that we are moving joint headquarters, and we've asked them to avoid certain dates for inspection if they could, because of course we're going to be moving from Bestwood Lodge to Sherwood Lodge. And it would be helpful if we're not trying to supply an HMI inspection on the day we're packing boxes into lorries. So I guess really overall, Chair, very positive for members of this committee. It's the final two areas for improvement. We're not complacent. We don't think just because it's done, the job's done now. We know we're very clear about where we want to continue working hard to make improvements around the people strand of HMI. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. So it's my understanding that you're asking us to approve the two actions from that, to sign them off, the areas for improvement.
Yes, Chair. I mean, it'll go, obviously, committee outcomes will go to full authority where there'll be able to have any scrutiny there as well. But the purpose of yourselves is, if you're happy without any kind of concerns, that we would look to close officially the remaining two areas for improvement for this committee.
Okay. So do people have any questions before I ask my question? So my question, Craig, is around areas for improvement, the 25 one, which talks about having a fair and open process around the development of high potential staff and aspiring leaders. So the reason you've said that we can sign this off is because there is a programme and a performance board to look at those issues. And I guess I'd just like to have some reassurance that what you have in place isn't just about kind of getting people through a programme and then they stay in their substantive post, and that there isn't that kind of mentoring to support people to actually move on. That it's more than just a training programme. So can you reassure me of that?
Yeah, and I know that Tracy will be able to come in as well here. If I look at if I look at the infrastructure that's in place, so members will be aware later, a couple of reports down, I think, of the new revised people strategy. And we've got a new leadership framework that is in place that is under that people strategy. We've got the behavioural framework as well. And we've got the NFCC leadership framework, so the National Fire Chiefs Council leadership framework that a lot of this is taken from. It's somewhat not misleading, but the idea of having a high potential scheme, we've actually had a look at this, and there's very few people, services that do high potential schemes. I think the HMI look at this like the police, because they have the National College of Policing and the structure and size, they do tend to have high potential schemes. In terms of the training pathways, we do offer coaching and mentoring. We brought somebody in to look at in the leadership role around coaching and mentoring. We've done it previously, and that's really to make sure that is getting further embedded. SLT have just had a session around with that leadership individual that's come into the organisation. So we do have pathways for people to pursue. We also use, which sometimes is seen as a negative, temporary promotions, more around the operational uniformed service, where people can go off and, they can go from being basically just a firefighter to a crew manager and have a temporary to see if they like it or not. We've got things like the Aspiring Leaders programme. The thing that hamstrings people most, and this is probably where my non-operational colleagues come, there's sometimes a glass ceiling because there's very little movement vertically they can go.
Yeah.
Because obviously they're brought in to be something like, say, an accountant, where they can't then go on and be the senior accountant, and they can't then, So, but there are some horizontal movement we've had. We have seen people come in from non-uniform roles as kind of more junior role in a department, who've then gone on to be a member of SLT. So we do have some quite good examples that are few and far between, and that is sometimes restricted by the level of movement we have. And I think that is something that we will see, and particularly things like PDR process was revamped as well. So there are objectives set in there now. So people can, if they want to be, express to be more sort of aspirational. And then the issue is, well, how do we get them through the mechanism? And we've also started things like, reverse mentoring as well. So we can help managers be reverse mentored for them to be better managers and leaders as well. So I think there's a number of strands here, Chair, that sort of says, well, you still haven't got a high potential scheme, haven't you? No, but I think we've got a pretty ambitious and a pretty robust framework in place now. We actually need to see leaders and managers and staff now demonstrating it and using it and pushing to potential.
Okay.
In terms of reassurance, I'm not sure what more an organisation of our size would actually do. And again, I'll defer to Tracy and possibly on this one.
Tracy, would you like to come in then?
Yeah, really just to reiterate, I suppose, what Craig has said, in that the revised leadership framework really sets out that pathway that any of our staff can choose to follow. So lots of different opportunities depending how people best perform. So some people would flourish with a coach or a mentor. Some people would prefer to have a more structured route through workshops and things like that. So what we've tried to do, we've got an Aspiring Leaders programme. We've had one for supervisory level types, first line management type roles for people who are interested in going down that route for about 3 years now, and that's been quite successful and quite popular. And we have seen people coming out of that process and then going into promotion processes and being successful. It gives them the groundwork and the confidence, to take that first step. And we're also doing some work at the moment for the crew manager process that's coming up in February, which is called Look Ahead. It's sort of, and again, staff who might be interested in moving from that firefighter role into their first management supervisory role are being supported through that, so that by the time they get to promotion process, they understand what it's about. When, if they're successful in role, they've got that background behind them when they start the role. So those are the sorts of things we're doing. And we've this year also introduced a middle manager aspiring leader program. So that's taking you from your first line management role, so in operational terms, crew or watch manager, to potentially the next role, which is station manager, or for support staff, the next high professional role or managerial role that you're going to take. And within that, we have a whole range of tools, and it's really up to people to decide which is the best route for them. So we do quite a lot of diagnostic work with people. So we put them in touch with a coach, and they go through profiling, and they say, right, these are your strengths, these are the perhaps things you can work on, and very much make it an individual process. So rather than sort of sheep dipping everybody through the same program, what we do is we work with individuals to say, okay, what do you need? What do you respond to? So if you'd like a coach, we can go down that route. If you'd like more formal workshops, we can go down that route, or we can do a combination of the two, whichever suits you. So we do try and make it about opportunity, really. And, as Craig has said, not sort of necessarily saying, well, one size fits all, because everybody has a different pathway.
Sure, yeah.
So we are trying to obviously encourage people to get engaged in that, and we are seeing, I think we put out an advert for the middle manager aspiring leader program, and I think we've had 21 people who have said they want to engage with it, which is really encouraging, the first time we've run it. And the first part of that is that we'll sit down with individuals and we'll go through profiling with them, so then they can develop with support and with advice their own development pathway. So that's sort of the approach we're taking. And then within that, we do have more formal development programs. So we do have ILM level 3 for supervisory managers, ILM level 5 for more middle managers, and then we have people who obviously go through more professional academic type routes. So, you know, we try and make that offer so that people can help themselves to develop, but get support in doing that, whether that's in a structured way or in an individual development way. So that's how we approach that leadership pathway.
Thank you. I'm reassured. Thank you both. So that leads us very nicely on. Oh, sorry, Jermaine wants to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, I won't take a lot of time, and I'm not sure whether it's a question or a comment really, but I'm really heartened to hear some of those initiatives that you're talking about, and I'm really pleased because the first scheme that you talked about, I thought it might be a little bit aimed at the high end and a bit elitist, and it's about, my concern was, well, how do we open it up to people lower down the level? And Tracy just sort of expanded on that, explained that, and that's really good. The only thing I'd say is that we've just got to make sure that we embed and make the whole processes bearing in mind diversity, because when we have an organization where there's minority groups aren't represented equally or fairly, then our first objective is obviously to recruit people first. And my experience is that you often end up recruiting at the lower ends, the lower skill set level. And then it's about how we accelerate their development and their promotion opportunities higher in the organization. So we eventually need to get to a point where we have representation of minority groups at all levels of the organization. And those pathways are a good route for people to get in. So the 30 or so people that, Tracy, you mentioned, I don't know what the mix is of people, and I don't need to know that today, but all I'd say to you is make sure that there's a good representation of people, and that the traditional sort of biases that work in our PDR process or the recruitment processes are removed, and we're more in tune with them and aware of those, so that we actually seek those out and try and make the recruitment processes and those pathways equally open to all people, so that we do have a representative organisation ultimately. And I think this is where Yassine would perhaps come in as well, and perhaps, you know, with his input as well, we make sure that those processes are free of discrimination. And, you know, we all know that, you know, institutional discrimination, whether it's racism, gender, or gay and lesbian issues, it's there. And we just need to be mindful of how some of those unconscious biases can work, really. Thanks.
And you know, I'll just add to that, you know, if we've got opportunity for progression, if it's a first come, first served, it might be that those colleagues who do belong to one of the minority groups who are a bit hesitant and wait, and then they apply for a place and it's gone, because it's on a first come, first served. So it's just being mindful, as Gervais says, around the equality and diversity, kind of what those what those cohorts look like. Craig, are you going to reassure me again?
I'm going to try to, but tell you, with, you know, as Gervais just sort of said, you know, I think we've got a lot of the building blocks structurally that are there, Chair, but I think there is the cultural institutional things, you know, the unseen things that don't make these, you know, the structural policy things as effective as they need to be. So, you know, I did a webinar where somebody sort of said there's no such thing as unconscious bias anymore. We all know these things are happening, so how can it be unconscious? And it's kind of a bit of a challenge there. But in terms of the first come, first serve, we always run a competitive process. The issue I have is, do people have the confidence to think it's right for them at the minute? So I'd use it more, say, from a woman's perspective. In the fire service, it's always been historically traditional that you can't go for promotion until you've done X amount of years, 10 years, because you need to make sure your ink's dry. And we lose a lot of really quality people with real enthusiasm earlier. So there is something around, this isn't about a time served thing. So there's a lot of the confidence thing. And I think with Mohammed coming in, we've also got some of the positive action work, and about the PDR process, about the talent spotting. It's about nurturing talent and spotting it and pushing them forward. And sometimes that's about giving them the confidence. So we've got quite some way to go, but you know, your points are all valid, and it's certainly not lost on us. But I think we're going in the right direction. But again, it's not an area. You only have to line the fire service up and say, well, is that reflective of communities? Well, it's a big resounding no then, isn't it? So we've got some way to go, but I think we're going in the right direction at the very least anyway.
Absolutely, Craig. We are on a journey, and you're absolutely right. We are moving in the right direction. That takes us very nicely to our next item on the agenda, which is a people strategy, which is from...
Sorry, Chair. I think they were looking for an approval from the committee. So is it okay if we get an indication on the approval?
Absolutely. My apologies. So we'll just raise some hands if that's okay.
Yeah, that looks like everyone.
Lovely. Thank you. My apologies. Craig, did you want to talk us through the people strategy, or would you like Tracy to come in first?
I'm going to introduce it, and Tracy's going to take us through it, because again, this is credit where it's due. Tracy has got us to this point, in terms of the cajoling and coordinating everything that Tracy does. You also, members, a look forward, we'll bring you a closure of what we think we did well on the previous strategy. We want to get this one in, get it moving, and then obviously give ourselves some time to have a look back as well and bring you some highlights of the current or outgoing people strategy. But if I could refer you to Tracy, please, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. The people strategy, we've had a people strategy now for some years, the committee will be aware, and the last strategy ran from 2017-20, and it was called Shaping Our Future, which hopefully resonates with some people. We reviewed that because clearly, that was linked to previous RMPs and things like that, and we needed to bring it up to date. So that's basically what we've done with this document. So what the purpose of it really is to address and prioritise workforce issues to help us meet the aims and objectives of the strategic plan. And to highlight some of the issues, obviously, that have emerged since the last plan, and to update that and to address those and think about ways that we are going to approach them. There is quite a short term to this, because when the authority approves its next strategic plan, which will be in 2022, then obviously we need to look at this again. We are sort of quite a long way through this now, given that it was implemented from April. So many of these actions were already in place, or have started, or are planned, and are sort of set out within our business plans for this year, and will be for next year as well. I mean, what I would say about the strategy is that it isn't just owned by human resources. This is about workforce. So this applies equally to managers within their own departments, thinking about their own priorities and what they need to set objectives within their own department. So it's developed within a HR context, but I'm always saying to people, this isn't my strategy, this isn't the HR strategy, this is a workforce strategy. So it's really important that you integrate these things into what you're doing, wherever you're doing it. So that's the sort of the context of the strategy. It's separated into some key areas, which we will see from the report from 2.2. So part of it is about delivering our services. So that's the typical HR metrics priorities. Have we got enough people? Are they in the right places? Have they got the right skills? How do we need to manage that to make sure that we are future-proofing our workforce, so that we know that when the challenges come in, we do have the right number of people, we do have the correct skills in place. So that's about delivering our services. We do a lot of that, obviously, through the workforce planning process. So every year we review and publish a new workforce plan, which comes through this committee. To say these are the priorities for us, this is what we're going to be doing over the next year. So although this is a 2-year plan, very much the planning part of it is running, it continues. It isn't a document that sits on a shelf. It's a document that evolves, and we're implementing it at different stages incrementally as we go along. Then we have the section which is called Shaping Our Workforce, and this is about trying to think about ways we can work differently. So are there things that we need to look at because of the changing landscape or because of a particular challenge that we've got, that means we need to look at how we're working and say, can we do that more efficiently? Can we do it in a different way? So this could include things like restructuring roles and teams, bringing in new roles, considering other ways of delivering services. So, for instance, previously it's like the strategic assessment or fire cover review, as it used to be known. We might look at things like, okay, what do we need to do in terms of where we locate stations, or what those stations do, or the working patterns on those stations. So those are the sorts of quite big issues we're looking at in terms of shaping our workforce. We might, for instance, decide that we need to do something through collaboration, rather than working with partners. So it's looking at all of those ideas and then saying, okay, if we're going to do that, how's it going to work? What do we need to do? So those are the sorts of things that we're talking about there in terms of shaping our workforce. In terms of inclusion, which is about creating a workplace, and this is our commitment as a service to creating a workplace where there's based on respect for individuals and acceptance of difference, and where no one feels excluded. So that's about our workforce. Where do we want to get to? That's what we want to get to. What sort of culture do we want within the organisation? How are we going to get there? But also about, as we were talking about previously, how can we better understand our communities and the services that we need to offer them, and how can we adapt that? So it's not just about looking internally, it's also about looking externally. And I think we've had quite a discussion about that and how we will go about that over the next year or so. Then we look at outstanding leadership. So again, this is about future-proofing. So knowing we've got the correct leaders with the right skills, who can lead us on into the future. So as part of it is succession planning. So making sure that we have those people who can step up, that we develop them, but also people who are already leaders and managers in the service. How can we develop them? What sort of leaders do we want? To be leading and role modeling within the organisation. So that sort of, as it says in the final paragraph there, links into work being done at national level about outstanding leadership for the sector and how we get there. So very much part of this is sort of integrating and dovetailing into work that's going on at a national level as well, as part of that. Workforce development is about obviously developing our staff to make sure and making sure that's an ongoing through your career, through your working life, having those opportunities to develop not just the skills, so we've got a piece of equipment, it's changed, we need to train people how to use it, but people developing themselves and other ways that we can support them with that. And making that accessible to people and encouraging people as well. So they think, that's an opportunity I can take. So our part in developing that learning culture, if you like, within the organisation as a whole. We then cover workforce engagement, which is about having really good engagement, communication with staff, with our representative bodies, with our stakeholders. And making sure that people have the information that they need, but also can feed back in that it's a sort of two-way process. So our workforce engagement is very much about establishing those channels and making sure that people are confident to use them. We then talk about positive workplace and culture, which again is part of inclusion. And I think, but we wanted that to be a very specific objective within the strategy. So creating that workplace and culture where people feel accepted and included and valued and involved. And also looking at things like values and behaviours. And, we've recently launched our behavioural framework, and one of the people who've just come into the organisation development team will be very much working on rolling that out And what does that mean in practice then? It's all right having values written down on a piece of paper. What does that mean in practice? What are we expecting people to do? How can people sort of live the values? So we'll be doing a lot of work in the next year around that. And then the final part of it is employee well-being. So making sure that we've got those structures and support processes in place for people to maintain their well-being, as well as obviously to support them if they then have an issue, whether that be a health issue or some other issue, that the service is there for them, and that they know the support that's available. So that's sort of the structure of the strategy itself. I won't go through it in lots and lots of detail, because there is at the back of the strategy a summary really of what success looks like. So sort of setting down what we hope to do, what we want to do, and then what outcomes are we expecting from that, so that through this and at the end of this, we can say, have we done it? How far are we away from that? What more do we need to do? So we have sort of set out that as a structure of saying, this is what we're aiming for. We won't always get there. It's very ambitious. There's a lot in there, as you can see, for the period of time we're talking about. But, those are the things that we'll be reporting back to you on a regular basis to say, this is where we think we are. So I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Tracy. That was a really kind of good kind of walkthrough of the strategy. I hope members have had an opportunity to take a read of it. So happy to take any questions for either Tracy or Craig. So I've got a few comments whilst people might be thinking. So I thought the sections, particularly on workforce engagement, that was a really strong section, and I was just really impressed with it, and the whole kind of focus in employee well-being and the focus on mental health that's in the strategy is really welcomed, and I was really glad to see it in the strategy. My only kind of quick question, Tracy, and it's just a quick one, is obviously the biggest change between now and 2022 is the move to the new headquarters, isn't it? And although it's mentioned here, it's not explicitly mentioned. And I just want, as a member, is it because it's not explicitly mentioned and it's kind of referenced? How big is the move in terms of the whole organisation? Does it in the strategy? Does it need a greater focus? Or is it as implicit as it's implied in the strategy?
It's picked up in the strategy under the shaping our workforce.
Yes, it's mentioned.
Yeah, the relocation of headquarters. Yeah. Important that staff, that's part of the engagement process. Yes. A key part of the engagement process over the next year is working with staff to allay any concerns that they have. Yeah. And to give them the opportunity to contribute. So, for instance, we are setting up a joint employee forum, which will be open to police and fire staff. So basically, they can come together and talk about any issues, any ideas they have, and then feed them through into sort of the project board and the people who are managing the move. So we've been consulting with our representative bodies over the last year, really, but we're going to start that formal process, consultation process, next month. So that will give us the year to be working closely with our rep bodies, working closely with our staff, just to ensure that, because this isn't, we talked about, we'll be, packing the boxes up in January, February. This is more about how will people feel about that move? What will they feel like when they're working, two different workforces coming together? So it's about making sure the planning we do for that is really effective, and that, on day one, people understand what's going to happen, where things are, who they're working with. It's not just about transferring the systems and making sure the ICT works when we get there. It is about people being comfortable and not anxious about the move, because, as you say, it is a big change for people who have worked in headquarters for, you know, for many years. So we will be doing those things to give you that reassurance.
Absolutely. I was just surprised that it's not there's not more mention of it in the strategy. It's there, but it's only there if you notice it. And I thought, given that it's going to be such a big change, that it would be more explicit in the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, we have got, outside of the strategy, we've obviously got quite detailed programs of work around that. Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you're absolutely on it. I wouldn't doubt that for a second. I was just surprised that there wasn't more narrative around that, and I wonder if you might want to consider that. That's all. That was my only, having taken a brief look at it myself. But otherwise, I think it's a good strategy. So if members, Craig, did you want to, and I think Javaid wants to come in.
Yeah, just obviously try and give you, Tracy's covered a lot of the stuff we are doing that sits under the strategy, Chair. I suppose really just give you the reassurance around the move. What we see is the strategy covering the whole organisation, almost independent of things that are happening. So it covers the organisation, but what we have got is the joint headquarters move is a year 3 priority in the strategic plan. So there's a whole piece in the business planning just to deal with it, and a separate project around joint headquarters as a move around the people element. So I think as officers, we're pretty confident we've got the detail boxed off that sits within the strategy. And of course, through the strategic collaboration board, where the chair, vice chair with the PCC sits on, all this will be reported there. And then members of the authority should be getting periodic reports about how the joint headquarters thing's going. So hopefully, Chair, you'll get the specific reassurance around this through that route as well.
Thank you. I think Javaid wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to make an observation, really. In light of the pandemic, the world of work has sort of changed significantly, and it's given us opportunities to look at alternative ways of working and having a better mix of way we do things. And it certainly expedited the process of using technology and working in a different way, which might have taken, I don't know, another 10, 15 years or 20 years to bringing that forward. And we've already seen the benefits of working like we are today through the internet and Zoom meetings. And whilst there are obviously downs, and I think we need to sort of reflect that in our people strategy, that this might be an opportunity for us. There's also downsides, and I think we need to be mindful of that, in as much as, you know, the development that takes place when you're sitting around as a group of people and you're talking informally sometimes over lunch or whatever, can't be underestimated, and so issues of isolation are there. But equally, we've noticed that there is a reduction in sickness absence, and which we not necessarily wholly attributing to this new way of working, but there is something, as Craig said earlier, about people having the option from working from home. And when you're working from home, you literally can just have your breakfast and, you know, without even showering or changing your clothes, start work. And it allows for flexibility. And I just wonder whether perhaps we need to start considering incorporating some of those aspects as we go forward. So I'm not necessarily expecting an answer now of this way, but I think I would actually, hopefully, like to receive some sort of welcome this as an opportunity. And I think it is an opportunity. It saves money on rent, it saves money on other things. It certainly gives greater flexibility in people balancing their work-life balance in a different way, and provides for greater employee satisfaction maybe. And certainly perhaps incorporates people's abilities or disabilities or other cultural aspects that they have. And in a sense, and in terms of diversity, I think this might be a good opportunity, really. And I think perhaps, you know, I'm looking forward to the organisation perhaps looking at this in a positive and proactive way, really. Thanks.
Absolutely. I'd certainly echo what you're saying there, Javaid. I think particularly for women who need that flexibility, this kind of new way of working for some women has been really welcomed. Craig, would you like to respond?
Yeah, and hopefully Tracy can take a lot of credit for this because she's kind of leading it. We're already looking at agile working. Tracy's developed a paper She's developed a paper already that's being considered by SLT around agile working. There are two things to that, two strands to it. Well, there are three actually. One, we were thinking about what does flexible working look like anyway, and the service already provides the opportunity for people to apply for flexible working, but that's more like individually initiated rather than organisationally, culturally, as seen as a norm. So the two things that are really driving it, one is the joint headquarters and the rethinking of how people work. That's a big issue around how do we want joint headquarters to work. And of course, COVID. And as Councillor Clears just sort of said, COVID has made us learn some really, really good lessons, and it's probably brought it forward many, many years. So those are the two kind of catalysts we're looking at. And as I say, Tracy's developed a paper for SLT to consider about how agile working might help. And these are the things, what we've done through COVID. We opened a lessons learned log. So as part of the debrief in the service, staff have been able to say, well, these are the good things or bad things we've learned during COVID. And we'll be able to use that debrief process sometime down the line to help us work about, well, how do we embed some new ways of working? So hopefully that gives the committee some reassurance that we are trying to think in that way. Thank you, Chair.
As always, you're ahead of the curve. Thank you. And do we need to approve the people strategy? Do you need some hands, or are we happy to? You do, okay. Can we approve the people strategy then by a show of hands, please? Thank you. In which case, I think that ends kind of our public part of this committee meeting, so that we can move into the confidential part of the agenda.
Yes, Chair, can we have an approval for the exclusion of the public?
Is that a show of hands? Thank you. Oh, you've all got bigger on my screen.
Some people have dropped off, Chair. So I will